Story 1. It is going to happen here in the Netherlands as well. No phones until they are 12. No social media until 15. Story 2. That is an objectively nice and good idea, and I support it. Good luck enforcing it, though. How on earth are they going to do that? Story 3. I'm 27. I grew up when social media was first expanding beyond Facebook and MySpace. Instagram, Snapchat, Tumblr, and Twitter all felt like they were being released one after another during my middle school and high school years. Everyone was rapidly joining them. I spent a great deal of time online, and while I met some amazing people, it definitely took away from my real life and mental health at times. I believe delaying social media access until ages 15 or 16, or even later, is a great idea. I hope it's possible to enforce this consistently. I believe it would help children in many ways. Many good points were made in responses. I agree that algorithm-driven feeds were a terrible introduction and a major factor in social media's toxic path. Yes, parents should be responsible for supervising media use, but what happens when platforms' algorithms glitch and I suddenly see content about events like September 11th from multiple perspectives, even though I never watch or share that type of content? This is something parents cannot control, no matter how many barriers they put in place. I believe this is where the government should intervene to limit this type of feed. Someone mentioned that a later introduction to social media would lead to worse addictions. Possibly, but what comes to mind is literacy levels and the rapid spread of negative effects like brain fog at a young age. If social media exposure is delayed, these effects might be less likely to develop. Potentially, this would help focus, strengthen, and develop young minds to handle it better when they are eventually exposed. There is a lot of scientific research on social media dating back to when I was in college, where I earned a bachelor's degree in psychology. Let me tell you, much of it was quite poor. Issues like anxiety, self-image, and self-esteem problems, algorithms pushing people into isolated communities, addiction, lost time, and predatory practices are all very real and very harmful. Story 4. I agree. I had enough self-esteem problems while I was in middle and high school before social media was a thing. I cannot imagine how bad it can be with social media added to the equation. Story 5. My question in response would be, what is social media? It sounds like a simple question because everyone kind of knows what social media is: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, right? But if you are going to regulate access to it, you need to clearly define what it is. That is not as easy as it sounds. Is it any website that allows users to upload content and create accounts? Because Wikipedia falls under that category. I do not think banning 15-, 16-, or 18-year-olds from accessing Wikipedia is a worthwhile endeavor. News sites often have comment sections below the article. Are we going to ban children from looking at the news? Is YouTube social media? Snapchat? WhatsApp? Archive of our own? Text messaging? An old-school forum for stamp collecting? Usenet? What exactly is the scope of what we are trying to limit access to here? As far as I can tell, this idea seems to be built entirely on impressions. You cannot just vaguely gesture at Instagram and say, "We are talking about that," if you want to formulate a coherent, actionable policy. Story 6. It depends entirely on what is considered social media. Are online video games in that category? I was practically raised on the internet playing Little Big Planet, not by parents. It is where I learned vocabulary, how to program, how to be creative, how to maintain friendships, and how to express myself. If I had no way to interact with others outside of my family, I would have still been neglected and even more isolated, and I would never have grown into a functional human. Story 7. This is really about forcing people to use identification on the internet. Banning kids from social media is just an excuse used to achieve that. Story 8. For context, that means his wife, when she was 40, would not have been able to message her husband on social media while she was grooming him. Story 9. Great idea, but how will it be enforced, and how can you prove age apart from having people upload photo identifications? Story 10. Government overreach. Spend less time and money policing how people live and more on tackling actual problems. This is done entirely for appearances alone. Story 11. Won't work. Counterproductive. Real anecdote. I'm French, so directly impacted. When my children, twins, reached the time of moving from primary to middle school, we considered giving them basic phones to provide more autonomy. We did not want to give them smartphones precisely to avoid early exposure. Moving from the cozy world of primary school, where children knew each other well over several years, to the larger middle school with more peers and anonymity, is often a small trauma at this age. Many friends are lost as some go to different middle schools. Some parents in the class had the idea of creating a WhatsApp group for the class. As a result, all parents felt forced to give their children smartphones. How can a parent tell their child, "Sorry, you will be an outcast to your classmates because I won't buy you a smartphone to stay in touch"? Thus, at 11 years old, all children gained access to social media. It turned out well. For several years, there were regular gatherings of the children who exchanged a lot. Even 8 years later, many children remain in touch and attend parties together, thanks to their early, protected access to social media. This changed my stance. Technological progress such as the internet, mobile phones, smartphones, and now generative artificial intelligence is stronger than us. Rather than fighting it, it is wiser to embrace it and try to make the best of it. Story 12. I do not totally hate it, but this will likely lead to kids using virtual private networks for their social media. It will probably mess up a few features on some apps, but I doubt this is thoroughly enforceable. As a kid, I lied about my age when creating my Facebook account so I could link it to games and track progress and likes. That is probably what will happen too. I read more about it, and it seems like they will implement an age verification system. This rules out lying about their age. However, storing data on anyone under 13 is illegal in the United States under the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. So if they were to tunnel through the US, they could likely still bypass the age verification requirement. This leaves what is probably a small portion of the total population under 15 that is capable of using a virtual private network, given the cost and technical skill constraints. Story 13. Terrible. This will be a nightmare for free speech. The only way to enforce something like this is to require users to upload government identification to the website, then upload a picture of their face every time they log in. Companies will either sell this information or hackers will steal it. People will be afraid to post because nothing will be even semi-anonymous, and unpopular opinions could have real-world consequences. This is an authoritarian regime's worst nightmare come true. Even if the current French government does not use it for harmful purposes, one in the future could, or a terrorist organization or enemy state could use it to locate people who express dissenting views in order to harm them or to find the exact address of every journalist or politician to assassinate them. Story 14. I think while it is an idea coming from the right place, it is largely unenforceable without sacrificing social rights to privacy that I am not willing to compromise. I also worry about how that will be used as a tool for abuse and information control by parents. It is naive to think that certain parents will not impose complete information blackouts on topics such as LGBTQ issues, the history of racism, and similar subjects. Story 15. If they can make it work without it being too intrusive or extremely annoying, that is fine. Adults are addicted to social media and not wise for it. How could something like that be good for children who absorb all that useless information and negativity like a harmful substance? Story 16. My major concern is the age, 15. I think it is a bit too old. 15 is when you are in high school, at least in America, and teenagers should have access to more things with guidance. If anything, we should be teaching internet safety, critical thinking skills, and proper sourcing and citing at the age of entering high school. It is the best way to defend against social media manipulation. A more suitable age would be 12 to 13 and under. Children under that age are far more impressionable and should not be trusted with unsupervised internet access, let alone social media. These are my personal opinions. Story 17. This idea is unbelievably unwise, and it pains me that so many people here seem to support it. This can only be enforced by forcing all internet users to identify themselves and creating a permanent record of all websites visited, which the government or advertisers can easily access. This is undeniably a tool that makes authoritarians eager. Also, the assumption that social media is negative for younger teenagers is mainly created to justify banning kids from social media. Children do use social media to socialize, which can significantly help their social development. However, there are many ways social media can harm children. Instead of removing their ability to socialize in the modern world, why not regulate social media companies so they cannot harm children? The algorithms used by nearly all social media platforms are optimized to push content that makes users angry or feel bad about themselves. They encourage users to identify with their real face, especially on platforms like Facebook, even though online safety tips always advise kids never to share such information. Social media's negative effects on children stem from the fact that it negatively affects everyone. People beyond a certain age cutoff are equally susceptible to online radicalization, but somehow believe they are not. The best approach is to prevent social media platforms from engaging in harmful practices like information harvesting and amplifying negative behavior. Please do thorough research about why governments are pushing this kind of law now, and consider whether they truly have anyone's best interests in mind. Story 18. It is as if we have not been selecting. I have read all the terms and agreements, and yes, I am older than 18 when we were supposed to. Story 19. Solves nothing. Now there will be many inexperienced 15-year-olds interacting with it. This only delays the problem and does nothing to improve the situation in the long term. Story 20. While a noble idea, it seems impossible to enforce. People already lie about their birth date to bypass age requirements on these sites. Story 21. It will not end well. Those starting at 15 will be just as unprepared and naive as those starting at 8. It will either be easy to circumvent or require everyone to sign up everywhere with their in-real-life identity. Story 22. Social media should also be blocked for people aged 65 and older. These older individuals seem unable to distinguish reality from fiction, even when exposed to poor-quality artificial intelligence images. Story 23. Laughing out loud. Good luck enforcing this. It is like going to any beer or wine website here in the United States, and they ask if you are 21 or to enter your birthday. The idea is good, but it is just not enforceable. Story 24. In high school, they could not stop students from using proxy shields to access any content. That was 25 years ago. Good luck. Story 25. I think it is a bad idea. The issue is that we live in a time where social media and the internet as a whole are almost requirements. Want to learn something you do not understand? Well, Google will take you to social media. What happens the day they turn 15? They will go on social media and have no skills or understanding. Social media is not always bad, especially when used correctly, so teach them to use it properly. How will it be enforced? Children are not dumb. They will find ways around it easily. Story 26. I am strongly opposed to banning social media for young people. Yes, it can cause some harm, but it can also save lives. I have seen many young lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and others who are not accepted by their families and are bullied in school. Talking to people online is often their only escape, and I think it would be cruel to take it away from them. Story 27. I absolutely support this and wish it were happening in Australia. Our Prime Minister tried to do it and received massive pushback, but it is something we desperately need. Story 28. The social networks will request the identification numbers and then leak all collected data. No thank you. Story 29. It is a lovely plan, but by the time they try to control the internet, the children will have moved on to something worse. Story 30. With context, it is a poor decision. This is gaining a lot of attention because a student recently stabbed a school supervisor to death. Despite the teenager not using social media much, the government claims this happened because of social media, but the problem is deeper than that. The educational system is not funded properly. Teachers and school staff are undermined and underpaid. Additionally, parents are becoming increasingly difficult and violent, according to a friend of mine who is a teacher. Story 31. I think their heart is in the right place, but I believe educating children and families on healthy use would be a good start. Parents ultimately need to set boundaries and be examples for their children. Story 32. It sounds like it will create more problems than it solves. It demands that social media take responsibility for parenting, but that would require giving them the ability to parent people. How will this be enacted without allowing invasive spying from social media? It sounds like one of those we have to protect the kids' power grabs. Story 33. How will I meet my future wife from a Facebook moms group at age 15 and become the next president of France? Story 34. I like the idea, but any law made under the pretense of protecting children has mostly resulted in making everyone's lives more difficult. Story 35. I am 44 with no children, but if I had a child, I would give them a flip phone until they were 16 and no social media until 16 either. I also would not give them a tablet at a young age and would only get them a computer for school, which would have to be in a family room, not a bedroom. I have read extensively about how social media has made children and teenagers depressed and anxious. I did not have a cell phone until I was 20 and a smartphone until I was 30. I did not have internet until university and had a much better play-based, creative childhood. Story 36. Like it or not, we live in a world that is highly dependent on understanding how to navigate social media effectively. Banning social media for children will only make them more ignorant adults when it comes to understanding how that world works. As a child, you have nothing of actual value to lose, your parents have many tools to enforce healthy moderation, and you have time to figure out how to build your own online identity. Delaying that process until age 15 or 18 only increases the risk of making mistakes. This idea is unwise, and preventing anyone from accessing normal parts of the internet is simply an abuse of power to keep people unaware of what is happening in the world. Story 37. In the words of the commentator from the video game FIFA 2007, nice idea, shame about the execution. Story 38. Huge move if it actually happens. Cutting off entire platforms punishes everyone for the actions of a loud minority. People will just switch to virtual private networks, encrypted chats, or decentralized applications, and the blackout ends up hurting transparency more than it prevents trouble. France has a long history of protest. Silence the megaphone and the crowd just gets louder. Story 39. Banning social media is much cheaper than teaching children how to effectively understand and navigate the modern digital landscape. The educational priorities should be moral values, language fluency, reading, media studies, and mathematics. Story 40. We have a similar law in Australia. If they figure out how to enforce it, can you ask them to inform us? Story 41. It's control wrapped in concern for children. Enforcing this means needing an identification card or form of identification in order to use any social media platform. Add that to national specific penalties and laws imposed on what you say on these platforms, and you have a strong control over the people, a huge revenue stream through fines, and separation and imprisonment for those who do not obey. Story 42. I feel the same way about this type of proposal. It is a lazy solution to the problem instead of actually teaching children how to have a safe relationship with social media. Story 43. We will have a group of 18-year-olds with the social media intelligence and maturity of 10-year-olds. Surely that will not be that bad, right? Right? Also, where are the parents? Did abstinence lessons work for you? Story 44. Social media has many uses. Ban predatory practices that make it operate like a casino to entice people into it as willing victims. Story 45. Need to replace it with something better than an adult who is neglecting them because they are stuck to a screen. Story 46. This is not the real purpose, just a flashy headline. The real agenda of modern governments is mandatory identification verification for anyone older than 15 on social media. Story 47. I do not agree. I cannot explain, but it feels very wrong for all those teenagers. I just get a feeling inside my head that says to me, that is not a good thing at all. Story 48. I'm not so sure after thinking about it that it is a good idea. I see two caveats. First, kids will find a way to overturn this, and the most toxic use of social media, which is community messaging, can be easily obtained with rich communication services messaging. Rich communication services replaces short message service, allows groups, emojis, and more. Kids will have phones before age 15 because we are no longer in a world where people navigate without a phone. So kids will have rich communication services, and they will start group messaging in their schools. Inevitably, there will be some bullying and other issues. Second, nowadays social media are the media. This is how people get news, debates, and similar content. It has replaced television, radio, and newspapers. Examples include YouTube and Reddit. Cutting kids off from social media is just cutting them off from information. Is it good? I don't think so. On the positive side, they will be cut off from fake news and toxic content, such as videos from insecure young males promoting hate. However, they also will not get information about the world except from outdated, traditional media. I understand the need, and at first I thought it was a good idea, but it really depends on the definition of social media. Story 49, he sounds like a king. If our president said that there would be protests from San Diego to Portland. Story 50. It is hilarious that when Texas did it, Reddit had a meltdown and said it was the worst idea ever. False? Oh, it is genius. Story 51. I am sure we will get there. It is just a question of time. Just like seatbelts, no one believed they would come. Today, we cannot believe we ever went without them. Story 52. I think this is the wrong approach. Social media is here to stay and has already become part of modern society. The answer should be closer to ensuring companies provide safe spaces for children and are held more accountable for what happens on their platforms. If I were to review my rarely used Facebook account with more stringent rules about content and verification, then Mark Zuckerberg would be under scrutiny by the end of the week. Story 53. The part that has always sat differently with me is the ban. Bans apply to people following the rules. Story 54. Many people support this, but I do not, because I know fully that it will lead to grooming, child sexual abuse imagery, and youth being pushed to darker places on the internet. It is absolutely revolting to see so many people back something that will only result in pain, misery, and suffering for minors. Story 55. I do not see any positives in children being on social media. The problem will be how to enforce it. Story 56. It would be more effective if children were not allowed to have smartphones and instead used traditional cell phones, eliminating the excessive use of smartphones. Story 57. Rules and more rules. Forbid something and you make it even more tempting. In the cycle of history, control and puritanism are returning. Sad times ahead. Story 58. Which do we think is worse? Kids on social media, or the combined problems of everyone having their real name and identification tied to everything they do online, stripping away any and all anonymity, and kids being more easily isolated from support by their parents? I think the latter two are worse. Story 59. I do not really think banning things is the way to go almost ever. People like to use social media platforms, particularly younger people, because they keep you connected to the people you care about. The problem is not access to the technology. The problem is how people engage with it. People need to engage with these platforms in healthy, responsible ways, and then the problem is solved. If we spend the time to teach kids how to do that, I think it will be much more fruitful than simply taking it away from them. Story 60. I do not think that it will work. Personally, I would focus on creating more websites for children, such as social media replicas, instead of trying to ban what already exists. When I was a child, I watched a lot of YouTube, played Club Penguin, and a lot of Flash games. I believe the internet can be an incredible resource for children, and in some cases, even a better place for socialization than school if used correctly. Story 61. When my wife's children were too young to be on MySpace and then Facebook, I was against them being on it anyway. My wife helped them get on by entering false ages, saying it was no big deal. Most parents simply do not realize it really is a big deal. Story 62. Make it 18 and have students learn social media in school to be able to distinguish between propaganda and honest news. The school should have its own social media platform to teach students how to manage it and how to behave appropriately on the internet. Many platforms like Reddit and Facebook, along with other social media sites, are filled with bots, so teach students how to identify them as well. Story 63. It is probably unenforceable in practice. Making any popular thing illegal usually just makes it more popular. The action that is really needed is to crack down on the social media algorithms, since that is causing the bulk of the damage to society. From the start, the algorithms that drive social media have been based on so-called artificial intelligence. The executives instructed the engineers to generate more clicks because that means more revenue. The engineers developed machine learning systems that figured out what gets people to click and released those onto the public. Unfortunately, it turns out that what makes people click is yelling, hate, and disinformation. This content gets artificially amplified, regardless of how few original posts there are. Toxic posts from a small number of individuals get quickly amplified by the platform until they receive millions of clicks. Facebook was largely responsible for generating a genocide in Myanmar, with entire families machine-gunned and live babies thrown into fires, the staggering rise of an ultra-right conspiracy theory movement in Brazil, and the rise of phenomena like Trumpism. YouTube's algorithm once identified that many individuals with harmful intentions would click on innocent videos of children in bathtubs and similar content, driving those numbers into the millions with suggested videos. The most horrifying part is that nobody planned it. No one wrote code to make this happen. The artificial intelligence developed these outcomes independently, and no humans fully understand how it works. Executives at social media companies have been repeatedly presented with extensive evidence of the harm caused, but they prioritize revenue and fail to act on the problem. People should read The Chaos Machine, the inside story of how social media rewired our minds and our world by Max Fisher. Story 64. Taking freedoms away from children is a significant sign of a failed state. It stems from the fact that you are unable to appropriately protect them and the rest of your citizens. Although considering the already broken mentality of the Western world, this is not surprising. This will do nothing good, neither for the children nor for the parents. The supposed idea is to give more control to the parents, but the reality is that if a parent cannot appropriately raise their child, that is a sign of a much bigger problem. There is also the added negative effect of taking away a crucial part of a child's development in this digital era. This will completely ruin children who have already learned the technology and will set the next generation back to the previous era without appropriately accessible technology. Story 65. I support the general idea, but I am questioning the implementation. Social media is damaging children, but I would rather not have my privacy invaded to achieve the goal of removing them from social media influence. Story 66. The government in the Netherlands is going to advise the same. It is a good thing that people stay away from this junk for as long as possible. It has no extra value in life. Story 67. I think it is a great idea and wish my country would do the same. Enforcing it is going to be hard, though. Story 68. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Banning social media will require an online identification system, which is a form of mass surveillance. I would support banning children under 15 from having access to a smartphone. Dumb phones are okay. Let kids live their lives untethered from the mobile internet. At home, they can still use it, but it is much harder to hide online activity when using a laptop or personal computer compared to a mobile device. Story 69. As a 27-year-old, I grew up during the initial explosion of social media beyond Facebook and MySpace. During my middle school and high school years, Instagram, Snapchat, Tumblr, and Twitter all seemed to be released one after the other. People quickly joined all of them. As a result, I spent a lot of time online, which occasionally negatively impacted both my real life and my mental health, even though I met some incredible people. Social media use should be postponed until age 15 or 16, or possibly later, in my opinion. Social media is a fantastic concept. I think it would benefit children in many ways, so I hope it can be implemented consistently. Story 70. I am completely sure that social media is like cigarettes in the 1950s and 1960s. Studies will eventually show that it is bad for us. Large technology companies, similar to the tobacco industry, will suppress the truth as long as possible, but eventually we will learn it is harmful and some people will still use it. Story 71. I honestly think this is a really good idea. The amount of foolish things kids do because of social media is a problem. My children do not have much access, but they already talk about being influencers, which is terrifying as an adult. We grew up with the beginning of the internet, and luckily most of the foolish teenage things we did were not captured to remain online forever. However, we still struggled with understanding that what is on the internet is not real. Younger people cannot really grasp that, and it is creating serious mental health problems in this young generation. Online communities can be incredibly dangerous and isolating, creating echo chambers that are extremely harmful. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.